Alors bonjour tous, j'espère que tout le monde m'entend bien. Écoutez, mon
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Eric Boulet. I work at the Department of Employment Policies and Strategies, Ministry of Labour at the Government of Quebec. And today I'm going to talk about teleworking. And I'm going to talk about the sociological aspect of teleworking because I will talk about it as being a business model, but also as being a catalyzer for potential transformation of our social relationships in the place of work. This is the layout of my presentation today. I'm going to talk about the different phases of development of telework, the benefits and advantages, but also its disadvantages and challenges. So we will talk about the different programs and measures that have been implemented here in Quebec in terms of telework and how it's been rolled out. In the first phase of telework, of course, because it's very recent that telework has been used, it has come, of course, hand in hand in the 1960s and 70s with the digital transformation. And next, we've had workplace relocation, so where people had to go to sites outside of their home, but that was not their office either. And then there was a second phase, which came with the advent of the internet. Third phase, which is the one that we are in right now, it came about five, even more, 5 years, a bit more maybe. The third phase is, of course, the time of mobility, but also the use of applications which allowed for more collaborative work, but also more and more video conferencing being organized, which of course comes with a few technical hitches from time to time. And since the crisis that we are currently facing, telework is being reorganized as quickly as possible, and we're seeing an increased use of teleworking. And some measures have been implemented since the beginning of the crisis. What does the future hold? Because a lot of people are more and more aware of the technological and environmental aspects.
We've also got increased teleworking by workers because it's just a lot easier for them. This goes without saying. And then following this, we also have a different element that comes into place, the fact that it's going to be the reality of the near future. I think that people will be working from home for a lot longer. Now I'm going to move on to a different aspect. I'm going to look at the advantages, disadvantages, but also the challenges that the future has in store. When we look at the different advantages, it goes without saying that you have to be a lot better at managing your working time. In addition, this also corresponds to trying to find that better work-life balance. This is something that has been creeping out of the woodwork a lot more. This also contributes to stress reduction on a general front and an overall increase, therefore, of a feeling of well-being when at work. We've also witnessed a decrease in road traffic because people aren't having to go to work, they're working from home, which in consequence has a positive impact on climate change. Why? Because there has been a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. This also participates in a reduction of road accident risks, once again because people aren't on the roads. This is also good given the fact that we are dealing with a healthcare crisis. What are the other advantages? We have seen substantial reductions or even eliminations of many costs for businesses and governments, rents, buildings that have to be rented out, leases, other expenses linked to maintenance costs and so on and so forth. And we're really starting to see cost reductions and cost savings being made. There has been increased productivity noted as well, which is actually better than expected. Why? Because managers are maybe better managing their time as well as their employees. And we've also seen regions coming back to life. I'm not just talking about big cities here, but I'm talking about even when you look a bit further afield, you can see that smaller towns and municipalities are also seeing a new breath of fresh air. Why? Because you have people working from home. This is the case in Quebec. What are the disadvantages now? We have seen that when we are reading up about how people are feeling, a lot of people feel that they're quite isolated, and this would be the most salient point, I would say. This is linked to the fact that they feel disconnected, and not only from the fact that they're disconnected from their employees and their other colleagues, but also the fact that then when can they disconnect from their work? We've also heard about different challenges in remote HR management. Why? Because you're having to rethink, you're having to think outside the box, rethink about how you want to organize your working day, an organized delegation of tasks, and so on and so forth. In addition to this, you've got the fact that the workforce and people aren't found in the same place. And because you don't need people to be physically on site, some companies have been looking and envisaging cheap labour. Why? Because they no longer have to bring people onto site, which means that anyone can work for anyone else from anywhere. You've also got differentiation between groups and statuses, so those who can work from home and those who can't work from home. So those who perhaps can't work from home seem to be at a disadvantage from a healthcare point of view. In addition to this, we also have problems related to computer security. This is something that comes up time and time again. Why? Because we're sharing data, and how can you protect this data in a digital sphere? A more recent issue that has been raised by several environmental groups is digital pollution, bandwidth, and all of these different smartphones, smart machines, smart tools. We've also seen a decline in economic activity in urban centres. Why? Because, as I mentioned, we're seeing smaller towns and municipalities come to life. Slightly later now, I think I will be able to talk about the different measures that have been taken into place. Lots of different programs have seen the light thanks to the Quebecois government. And this is something that actually is helping businesses and also self-employed workers to develop teleworking. I'll come back to this in a second. I'll talk about the different programs that have been put into place for those who are making that shift to teleworking. In conclusion, I would say that in a digitally transformed world with a major impact of our ecological footprint and associated risks can also be witnessed, it would be important to give more thought on how to attain the tools to communicate better, work better, but also live better together. In this respect, telework is a handy solution. It represents a working paradigm, but it also could become the means by which we could, in the medium term, consider transforming our relationship to work. On this note, I'd like to thank you. I'll come back to the different points during the discussion, and the floor is back to you.
Floor to Cherry to see if it works, so he can introduce the next speakers.
Bonjour.
Good morning, good afternoon. I hope that it will work this time. I hope that all of the technical issues have been resolved. I'd like to apologise, and without further ado, I know that we were slightly late out of the starting block, so we can get straight into the matter. I'm going to give the floor to Lenka Kent and Annick Bergen. They'll be sharing their experience, what they've been through rather, with VDAB, the Flemish Employment Agency. They'll be talking about teleworking and mediation. Lenka Kent and Annick, you have the floor.
I think the floor has to be given to Lenka first.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. My name is Linka Kind. I'm Strategic Account Manager at VDAB, that's the Flemish PES in Belgium. And I will have a presentation about telework and mediation at VDAB together with my colleague Annick Bergen. VDAB has already a very long history and a great experience in working remotely. Let's have a look at the evolution. Once upon a time, very long ago, VDAB introduced the so-called channel mix. The principle is the following. Face-to-face contact between mediators and job seekers is not always necessary. Very often, the contact can be done by phone, by mail, by email, etc. And the intention of the channel mix system was that mediators would also come into contact with their customers by telephone, email, etc., instead of having to invite them to the office every time. However, this system never really found acceptance with the VDAB mediators. They maintained as much as possible face-to-face contacts with the job seekers. In 2018 then, VDAB launched the new contact strategy. It's not very new anymore, but we still call it the new contact strategy. And the process consists of 3 steps. Digital first. The first step and the first reflex is to use digital devices to deliver services and to get services. So it's for the mediators and the job seekers. VDAB has online services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The second step is human digital. If the customer needs more help, he can always have it by contacting a mediator by phone, mail, video chat, etc. And the final step, the third step, is face-to-face. Only when the first 2 steps don't work, it means only when really necessary and with an added value, the mediator meets face-to-face with the customer. That's regarding the service delivery. Regarding the staff, in 2019, VDAB introduced the so-called in Flemish PTOW. In English, it is WIPT, working independently of place and time. Every staff member had already his laptop. We all got a mobile phone, and we could work 1 day a week from home and 1 day a week from another VDAB office. But then we had the COVID-19, the corona crisis, and the pandemic accelerated the digital work. Instead of working independently of place and time, we had to work 100% independently of time at home. There were no face-to-face contacts anymore with customers, colleagues, or the team leader. And even if we practiced already remote work, still it was a big turnaround and adjustment. I leave now the floor to my colleague, Annick. She is mediator in the sector services to companies and individuals, and will tell us how she experienced this 100% teleworking in her daily tasks. Annick, you have the floor.
Everybody. It's a real honor for me to share my experience of working at home with all of you. My name is Annick Bergen. I work as a mediator in a rather big team in a city called Dist in the Flemish part of Belgium. My team is called Services to Companies and Individuals, meaning that I deal with people who are looking for a job as cleaning people, hairdressers, kitchen helpers, bartenders, but even social workers as well. As Lenka already told, we were allowed to work from home for quite some time already, but I only worked at home, let's say 1 or 2 days maximum in the period before the lockdown. So on Monday, March the 16th. That was the first day of our lockdown. Me and some fellow colleagues still went to work, and because we didn't really know what was expected from us, and we still went to the office for business as usual. As soon as we arrived, it was quite clear that we were not welcome anymore. Our team leaders sent us home. And I remember I grabbed some things like a keyboard, a mouse, because I really don't like working all the time on a laptop. So I use my keyboard and an external mouse. And also a headset, which I'm using right now. And I went home. So I installed myself at the kitchen table and I started working. And to be honest, I really think I felt lost. I think it was because I missed my daily routine. Getting up on time, take a shower, prepare sandwiches for lunch, drive to the office, have a coffee and a small talk with a colleague. And I was lost. In the first 2 weeks, I really struggled with the new way of working. I missed my team members, I missed the talks, I missed the interaction with them. And I also felt like I had to be available every single moment of the day. I remember I even took my cell phone to the toilet, to the little room, because I was afraid I wasn't answering a phone or my team leader could call me and I thought I wasn't working. So it was really adapting myself to a new way of working. And then all of a sudden I began to see the advantages of working at home. There were no morning rushes anymore. There was no stress to get in time in the office. I even could go out for a walk during lunchtime. I was at home when Bpost or Zalando or Amazon delivered a package. And sometimes I even found time to prepare dinner during lunch break. Then soon I moved from the kitchen table to a place upstairs where I'm sitting right now as well. And I discovered another advantage. I wouldn't have to leave my desk clean in the evening as I was used to, but I could leave everything on the desk and go home again. Then in contacting my clients, I call them clients, these are the people who are unemployed and looking for a job. At first I contacted them by mail or by phone, a bit like I was used to. And in fact I didn't use, for instance, video chatting because I found every possible excuse, like it was intruding in their personal lives. Maybe they didn't have the right equipment. Maybe they didn't like to do it, and that every single excuse was good. And I was used to doing it with colleagues because we still had our little talks through video chat, or even with my daughters. I have 3 daughters who don't live at home anymore, and during the lockdown I couldn't see them, so I had to chat with them through video chat. But still it was an obstacle for me to use that tool with clients. And then at a certain moment I got stuck in a conversation with a client, and in a normal face-to-face conversation I would have turned my screen and show her what I was telling her, but that wasn't possible. So I thought maybe I should suggest that I go to a video call with her to switch the conversation to a video chat. And then I did so. I first checked if she had a computer with a camera and a video, and also with noise and an internet connection, which was the case. So I could turn the conversation into a video call with her. And then I was able to show her my screen. I could share my screen with her and show her what I was telling. And as of that moment, it was for me the occasion to introduce video chatting with my clients more often. So I didn't need the face-to-face conversations anymore. in the meantime, we are all allowed to have face-to-face conversations again, but only for those clients who are not reachable. So people you can't reach by phone or by mail or by video call. And I must say, for me personally, I still love to have at least one face-to-face conversation, because you can see so much more through a personal conversation. You can see how people behave, how they are dressed. You can read between the lines, and I think that is also very important. That is something you cannot do through a video call, or maybe through a video call, but not through a telephone call or a mail. So for me it still is an added value to see people just at least once during the contacts. What more can I say? Maybe I can say, and that is something that Erik, I believe, said as well, I think I work more efficiently now I'm working at home, because when a colleague gets a telephone call, I don't get disturbed. When somebody pops in the office, I don't get disturbed because I'm sitting here all by myself alone. So I guess I work more efficiently now I'm working at home, but I still miss the contacts with people, with my colleagues, my team members. And therefore, with the closest team members, we try to have a video call at least once a week to talk about our jobs, but also to talk about small talks, about family, like we used to do the social talks. Our team meetings were also through video call, and only last week we had our first team meeting in 6 months. And I must admit that it was a bit awkward to see each other again. We were all very excited to see each other again, but at the same time, it wasn't normal anymore. So we got very used to working from home and to see each other only through video call. So I guess we all get used to working at home, and I think it's still worthwhile to see each other in real life and to have real conversations as well. So this is my contribute. I don't know if there are other questions, or maybe Lenka wants to tell you something more. Maybe I can also tell that our team leader try to have contact with each of us individually, in smaller groups and in team group. For instance, unfortunately, my mother-in-law died from COVID-19 during the lockdown. And although I knew my team leader was very busy at the time, he still found the time to call me, to ask me how I was doing, how I was struggling with it, and that I really appreciated. And I think that is very important as well, to keep the social contact, the human contact, and we mustn't forget that. Now I give the floor back to Lenka.
Thank you, Annick. So as a conclusion, we can say that by forcing digital work, the channel mix has developed a lot, and a number of things worked, even if we didn't think it would work, but a number of things didn't work. So regarding the quality of this experience, it's a little bit too early to draw conclusions about the quality of this new kind of service delivery. Why? Because we don't have a normal labor market nowadays. The fact that job seekers cannot find work may be due to the 100% digital services, but it also may be due to the fact that there is no work to find for the moment. So the quality must be taken out of the figures in the long term. But VDAB absolutely wants to go further. And at VDAB, we want to do the mediation and the services to job seekers digitally proof. But there is still work to be done. There are some legal aspects that are not like it has to be. So from a juridic point of view or in the communication with the clients, there is still work to be done. The tools have to be GDPR proof. We have to find the right balance between teleworking and face-to-face contacts. And that's why at VDIB we launched the project Digital the New Normal, where we analyze what do we keep, what can we keep, if it is legally anchored, etc. So this was our presentation. Thank you for your attention. I don't know whether I have to answer the questions right now or a little bit later.
Merci Lenka, merci Annick.
Thank you, Lenka. Thank you very much, Annika, for sharing your experience. We know that there's a lot of grey areas when it comes to teleworking. The fact that you need to find that balance between personal life and professional life. This means that you need to structure your days, structure your lives a little bit better, but also what it means for services that you are offering. Just to complete the landscape, maybe we can share another experience. We can talk to our colleagues coming from Sweden. Maybe they can talk about an experiment they had with tele-leadership. And for this, I will give the floor to Anna Palmgren. She is in charge of the digital management unit and the employment agency in Sweden. Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Anna. Nice to meet you. It's a very interesting day today, I have to say. It's been very interesting to see how you solve all these problems that actually happen when we're doing this in teleworking. But still, it works perfectly now, so hopefully you can hear me as well. Okay, so I am Anna Palmgren and I work at Swedish Public Employment Service. And with me today, I have Jens Wretling and Camilla Weide. They will also speak in a bit, at least Jens will, and Camilla has helped out with all the beautiful pictures if you're interested in that. So just to let you know, we are 10,600 employees now. We used to be 14,000 when I was in Marrakesh 2 years ago, but it's changed since then. We are now 7,500 who have direct contact with clients, and we have 2,500 who work with customer services, such as emailing, telephone calls, and sometimes video calls as well. And the local offices meeting customers are 6,700. So mostly people are working still locally, but today, obviously, they work from home, most of them. 2,500 people work for the head office and support the rest of the organization. And out of these people, 730 people are managing this. So this is a bit of a change for us. And we would like to start to talk about what happened in 2014, because this is a big change for us. We, the Swedish Public Employment Services, started to formulate a new leadership in 2014. It was a philosophy that focuses on trust-based management, less hierarchical leadership, and giving more space and responsibilities to all the employees. It's a flatter organization with self-leadership, that's what we call it, in focus. We also started to listen more to what the customer actually wanted and needed. We had, of course, asked them before, but actually, to be honest, we assumed a lot and developed our services out of these assumptions. And this is different now because the results that came from all these customer journeys were that our values became much more important. This is 6 years ago, so we've worked with that for quite some time. And I would say that today is a different situation than 6 years ago. We work much, much more with our values within the Swedish Public Employment Service. And also the trust-based leadership has changed the way we work together. Everybody feels more autonomous and work more with our self-leadership. And of course, the customer journeys that we made, a lot of them, we asked so many interviews, I would say probably around 10,000 interviews were made. that made us understand what we have to do to meet the customers. And everybody, and that means even if you had any disabilities or didn't speak the language, they wanted to start in the digital way. And we now meet our customers where they want to be met. Some people like to chat, some people like to use the phone, and some people, of course, like virtual meetings like these ones. So it's a bit of a difference than what it used to be when we always met them face to face. And of course, you've heard about Corona, and I'm sorry that I listen now to the Belgic Annick, who told us about her mother-in-law. I'm very sorry to hear about that. And some people, of course, have many traumatic memories from the pandemic. And I am very, very sorry to hear about all these tragic feelings that people have. And of course, the pandemic has also changed the way we meet people in Sweden. I'm sure you've heard about how we handle the pandemic. It's a bit different than the rest of the world, but I will say that when it comes to our digital tools, it's amazing what has changed. Ladies who are 70 years older than 70 years or older, they have actually increased their shopping online by 800%. It's a huge difference for us. So that's a new market where people can actually think about how we could work with that. And also Swedish citizens have chosen to meet doctors online, of course. It has increased, the numbers have increased by 1,000%. And also when it comes to job seekers then, they tend to get in touch with us much more digitally. So in 2019, we had 44,000 registered job seekers online. And in 2020, it was 177,000. So it's an increase of 400%. And we think this is mainly because of the pandemic. And of course, the situation made us work from home as well. We had to learn new digital tools and work with social distance. We had to think and work from a different way than we did before, of course, and it increased, unfortunately, our unemployment rate a lot. We now see very high numbers, up to 10%, and we haven't seen those numbers for many, many years, maybe never. And it has made us reorganize our organization. So we moved 650 employment officers from the local offices into our customer services, and it actually went quite smoothly. So from 1 week, they met people face to face, and then they changed to meeting them only online. And it has worked perfectly well. I think the huge difference was the leadership that we actually worked with before this happened, and it made it possible to see what kind of possibilities this was. And in order to show you all of this, I have now Jens from Köping, who is coming in and letting us know what the manager said. You have interviewed them. Jens, are you with us? All right. Okay, so we'll see if Jens will be back with the sound in maybe just a few minutes. I think he's checking right now. I can see that. So let's see if Jens is coming back to us. Is it working? So what we have to do in this teleworking times is patience. We have to work with our patience, right? It's very interesting to just see what happens. I can say what Jens wanted to say. So, all right, I'll be Jens for a moment. And for everybody who wanted to get to know Jens, you saw him for a short period of time, and you will also see him in a film that we will let you all have after this meeting. So you'll see the full interview with this manager, first floor manager, who actually thought there was a huge difference in working from home. First of all, she felt a bit strange, like, do I really have to do this? I think I could definitely see how that feeling was. And she also felt like she had to learn a lot. And especially the digital tools that we work with here in Arbetsförmedlingen, which is, of course, a bit of a difference depending on what you're used to before. But she also says that it's a huge difference now that she actually likes working with the digitized world, and also that all her employees, some of them were the ones who were moved from the local offices into the customer services. They actually like working there now. So they have applied for jobs there so they can stay in the customer services where they before really didn't want to work. So it has made a huge impact. And I would say that if you have the possibility to see the whole interview, please do that. It's very interesting to see her thoughts. Okay, so I will continue and show you as well. This is, of course, Jens, so you can see what he looks like, and the first line manager, Malin. All right, so who are we? We are digital engagement, and this is our business. This is what we do. We try as much as we can to adapt and nudge people into trying new digitized tools and the digitized world. Because, of course, we have to continue working with this in the society. It's not because we want it, it's because the customer wants to. All right, so we inspire, we involve, and we engage as much as we can. We spread the knowledge, sharing news, we pack content as much as we can, and we create the conditions for the employees to increase their digital skills. But of course, it's nothing if the customers don't use the digital services. And now I have to say that they are using it a lot, much more than what they did before. And if you want to increase your digital skills, let me give you some advice. You could, if you want to, try digitalayag.se. It's now translated into English, so everybody who wants to try that, please do. You could always also use Google Translate, so it's also in French and Spanish if you're interested. This is our collaboration with Google that we started in 2017. And it's made 100,000 people, Swedish citizens, much more interested in how they can be more digitized. It's, for example, how you use secure homepages, how you pay digitally, how you work that way in the society that we live in today. So I would say that if you haven't tried it, please do. It's very interesting to see, and you could learn a lot. We have also these days increased the numbers. So we have about 4,000 people who have tried the online courses that we have. They are 45 minutes to up to an hour, and they're live sent. So if you're interested in that, you could do that as well. We also nudge our staff to lifelong learning through our own platform called Digitalportalen. It's something that we use so people can see short articles, do short courses and quizzes, so you get more interested in the digital world. And we also made these open to other governments who are interested in this, because obviously if we are developing something that is good, some people want to know more about that, and why should we just keep it to ourselves? We think it's nice that everybody use them. It's called Open Digi, and you can just download it into your intranet and use it daily. So I would say that this is a good thing, and we try our best to do open data interests in the government world. It's a bit tricky sometimes, but we do our best. And we are a small section. We're only 9 people, and that means that we have to be very flexible, autonomous, customer-oriented, and we always seem to think that everything is possible, like now, for instance. So let me just leave you with some friendly advice. My first advice is that you use known digital tools, because for people to start using new digital tools, it's a much higher bridge. So if you can just try to use the ones that your kids use or your parents use or whomever, try that first. And we have digital ambassadors within Arbetsförmedlingen that we use a lot. We give them as much information as they need, and they can try the new tools and then introduce them into the normal way for everybody to work. and try to be a role model. Try some new things and try to see Digitala Jag if you have the possibility, because it's quite good, I have to say. And also frequently non-working meetings. This is something that Malin talks about. When you see the film, you'll see what she says. It's something that she finds very interesting, that people want to talk about everything, maybe not work, but they need frequent meetings. So maybe even everyday meetings for the people who are working from home to get the isolation not feeling as horrible as it could be. And also e-learning, of course. Your lifelong learning is very important. Please join every single article or course that you can take if it's possible, because it makes your life much richer. And of course, wash your hands and keep the distance. Thank you for listening.
Bien, merci Anna.
Thank you, Anna. Let's continue with these testimonials. We heard from Europe, and I'd like to move to another continent with Azadine Gamraoui, who's Partner Deputy Director of ANEM in Algeria. He'll talk about teleworking in Algeria within ANEM. Azadine, you have the floor. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. So, good afternoon. I'd like to introduce myself. Good afternoon, everyone, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me. My name is Gamraoui Azdin. I'm Partnership Deputy Director within the ANEM in Algeria, and today I would like to share with you our experience, modest experience with teleworking. I'd like to start with a presentation of ANEM. Could we have the presentation, please? Because it doesn't seem like my slides are showing. I can't see the slides on my screen. Could we have the presentation on the screen? You actually have the hand, you have control over the presentation. You have arrows that you can click on. So I think we can give you the floor again. But again, you should use your mouse to move from one slide to the other. Okay. So as I said, we wanted to give you a quick presentation about who we are, and then we'll say why we chose to work from home, and also what we did within ANEM. Then we'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages, and also the perspectives in terms of work and what it means for the future. So to start off, it's not working with the mouse. It looks like my presentation is not working. Well, it looks like there's a bit of a technical issue with the slides. I suggest, can you take the floor?
Thank you very much. Let me see. I think we have these slides for you. I started here. As Thierry already told you, you can move the slides with the arrows. So I think that I can give you the floor back and we can all see it and we can also see you move it. So I hope you can see that as well. I give you the floor back. So this is the starting presentation and you were on this one. I will give you the floor back and then the arrows appear so you can click on it again. The floor is yours again, Azedine.
Alors, merci.
Well, thank you. No, I apologize. So, I'll start with the presentation. There you go. So, the ANEM is a national employment agency. Its goal is to regulate the labor market. The name has changed in 1990 to become ANEM. ANEM is, like I said, a national employment agency. As you may know, we are the interface between demand and supply in terms of labor. We work under the umbrella of the Ministry of Employment in Algeria. Here are our missions and roles. We are here to organize and ensure knowledge of the situation and the evolution of the national labor and workforce market. We're also there to set up an information system to provide accurate, regular, and reliable information on the labor market and manpower fluctuations. We're here to participate in the organization and implementation of specific employment programs adopted by the state, local authorities, and other institutions concerned. We're also there to explore all opportunities for the placement of national workers abroad. Our staff, we have 4,917 employees. 76% are executives. We are 323 agencies at national level, so we're present everywhere with 275 ALEMs, so local branches. And again, we are present across the whole country. I'll give the floor to my colleague now. Good afternoon, everyone. It's actually really interesting to share with you our experience. My name is Yasoul Yahya. I'm IT manager at ANEM. So I'll take over the presentation. What can we do? How can we organize in the face of this health crisis? From an IT perspective, there's clearly a health crisis that we're all experiencing with COVID-19. So the question is, what can we do? Well, we need to make sure that there's a continuity of our services, the services offered by ANEM, and we need to make sure that we meet our objectives as set by ourselves and our partners, because we are working in partnership with the European Union and other partners. So moving to the next slide. What are the stakes? As I said, what is at stake is to make sure that we are able to sustain our services, because our goal is to offer our services to citizens. We have a dedicated service offered to the citizens of Algeria, namely job seekers and employers in the local market, labor market. We're working across the country, and what was at stake also was to make sure that we can follow up on the different cases. Because we couldn't move, there were some roads that we couldn't take anymore, and so we wanted to make sure that we could still offer our services, but also follow up on these services. And as many of our colleagues have said, we needed to make sure that we could maintain this contact with, first, our colleagues, because we work on the technical side of things, and most of our work was, again, we had a huge workload, and there were new tools, new aspects, and we had to adapt in the face of COVID-19. For some reason, the slides won't show. I can see that my microphone and my video are working. It seems like my presentation is not working, however. I don't know if someone can help me with the slides. Oui, il s'est déconnecté une seconde. Thierry, je vais vous rendre la parole pendant
he's coming
un
back
instant,
in again.
jusqu'à ce qu'il
And
se
maybe
reconnecte.
I can give the floor to you again, Thierry, so the floor is
Je vais vous rendre
yours.
la parole.
Bonjour.
It's me again, another technical issue. I just wanted to say that you can ask questions in the chat. We will try to answer them later. You have a table in the chat to ask your questions. If we don't have time to ask all the questions to the different speakers, we will take note of them and we commit to answering you afterwards, and to also publish your questions as well as the answers to your questions. I don't know if our colleagues from ANEM are back to continue their presentation on teleworking. So here I am back. So like I said, there were a lot of stakes. So what tools did we use? Well, digital tools, obviously. The process has been made completely digital, especially most of our services. Everything that was done internally was now digital. We have digitalized some of our processes. We worked more and more on, there's a clear increase of the video conferences organized, and internally we put into place a collaborative platform, and the use of this platform has increased up to 400%. And of course, the different employees of ANEM were able to communicate and to collaborate. This platform is dedicated to the employees of ANEM, and we also offered an instant communication platform so people could still working and offer their services. We also created a personalized environment for different aspects related to the personal environment of teleworking. So we really offered services to citizens also on collaborative platforms. So moving on to this slide, where the internal and external organization, we've had a lot of meetings organized to follow up on our different activities. There were also coordination meetings, internal meetings, but also externally. We worked for the benefit of job seekers, academics, and employers. We organized workshops on job search techniques with different tools. Let me give you a few facts and figures on video conferences because it became the heart of all of our activities. Currently, I am in this call with you, but after this meeting, I have another meeting, and I have another one until 6 p.m. And because I'm team leader, my time is of the essence. I have a limited time to share what I have to share with my colleagues. And I also have to have a briefing at the beginning of each week and a reporting system at the end of each week. And as you can see here in blue are the video conferences organized, and you have a huge increase, as you can see. But you also have a peak in audio conferences and video conferences. And the use of the chat, of the instant chat, has increased as well. This is the graph on the right-hand side. So again, this is just to show you how much we've had to adapt with all the tools that were available to us. But there are disadvantages to these tools, but this is something that my colleague will talk about in a second. Again, I'm giving the floor to Mr. Azdin Gamraoui.
Floor to Thierry for a
Merci.
second.
Je vais donner la parole à Thierry
It
un
seems
instant,
that your colleague is offline. So
parce qu'il
Thierry,
semble
the
que
floor
votre
is
collègue
yours.
soit déconnecté. Thierry, vous avez la parole.
Bien. Bonjour, oui, je vois quelques questions qui arrivent et que je vais relayer tout à l'heure.
There are a few questions coming in on the chat, and I will ask them to our different presenters later on. There are a lot of questions on how can you cover regions remotely, especially when there are issues in terms of connectivity. There are also questions on people's equipment. So I think that these questions will be answered later on. I would like to ask our Algerian colleagues to take the floor again, to pick up where they left off. Are you online? Are you with us? Thank you, Thierry. As you all know, we are part of cooperation, and I would like to say hello to Patrick Bounelier, who is in this call, because he has supported us as part of the support program for the implementation of the association agreement. Hello, Patrick. And because of coronavirus, this cooperation program was paused. But thanks to teleworking with our friends from Pôle emploi, especially on the Beta Rosa program, we were able to, P3A rather, we were able to continue 80% of our activities that were organized and planned prior to the health crisis. So the activities as part of the P3A program. We have organized different video conferences, and we've put into place a program to improve the employability through further training, which we call DALF. And we worked with different partners on a project called TAUDIF 2 from University to Work to better integrate and counsel on entrepreneurship. And we have different projects with partners for cooperation programs. I'll give the floor to my colleague.
Fortunately, is offline.
Pardon, il semblerait que votre
So
collègue soit
he is back again. I see
déconnecté.
now, so I will give the floor to
Il est
him.
à nouveau parmi nous. Je vais lui rendre la parole.
Thank you, Joanita.
So now, I would like to talk about our experience with teleworking. And I would like to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of teleworking from our experience. Here, you have an illustration of the different advantages that we have been able to perceive. First, a lot of time has been saved because there was no transportation. Also, working is made easier from home when people are not able to move, when employees are not able to move. And also, this allows for a better work-life balance. Sometimes during lunch break, we can have lunch with our family, and at the end of the workday, we can be with our family, reunited with our children and our family right away. And also, we are more available, and we can take some responsibilities even outside of the working hours. So we're always available. And of course, there are less interruptions. We're not interrupted by our colleagues, so we're more focused, especially in the IT field and the technical field. And this is something that is really important. And when it comes to the disadvantages, and again, I'm talking about from our experience, first there's social innovation, and this is something that we can clearly see. Sometimes also there's a loss of information and communication time. Also, some of our colleagues are not as motivated anymore because of this isolation. And this is something that we need to address. We need to make sure that people stay motivated even if they're isolated. For instance, if I have an average of coding to do, but we have 4 video calls per day, this is something that I do with my team. So, on average, 4 video conferences per day. So we try to strike a balance between the added value of these video conferences and the actual work that we need to carry out.
This is linked to face-to-face, and actually what we needed to do is try and recreate what you do get when you meet with someone physically to when you're trying to deal with them at a distance. We've been working with the national organization in Algeria. It's very important to talk about the advantages. The fact someone else mentioned that there are fewer road accidents. Why? Because fewer people are using their cars. This is linked to the fact that, as I've just mentioned, people aren't on the road. You've also got savings with regards to transport costs, and there's another huge advantage when looking after your health. Employees are much better from a health point of view because they're at home and therefore not running the risk of contracting the virus. However, there is a lot of disadvantages. For example, a lack of legal framework for teleworking in Algeria. This is a disadvantage for many companies when it comes to the crisis. Why? Because if in the future we wanted this to be something that would be sustainable, you'd need to have a legal framework. It's also a lot more difficult to check that working conditions are adequate and adapted to the situation. Unfortunately, there is no follow-up. There isn't any way to check that there is a standardized or that there are standardized working conditions. It's very difficult for management to put this into place. This goes for not only IT structures, but also other types of businesses. Generally speaking, these were the advantages and disadvantages, both for the employee and also for the National Agency of Employment in Algeria. And on this note, I give the floor back to my colleague. I'd like to give the floor back to my colleague. Thank you. Thank you very much, Yahya. Just to conclude, we'll be talking about the different perspectives. To start off with, all things said and done, we've spoken about the advantages and disadvantages. So, what does the future hold? We can look at putting in a framework and a better schedule with regards to the number of hours that people are working from home. We also want to offer new services for employees and job seekers. How can we move away from a paper trail? How can we look at digitalizing some of our business processes? And also, how do we use this as a point of leverage from a recruitment point of view? Prior to concluding, I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts with you. I would like to give my sincere condolences to our Swedish colleague and our Belgian colleague. I also want to tell you that I've been working from home since March. I got married last December, on the 31st of December. So working from home made me very happy because I am a newlywed and I got to spend a lot of time with my wife. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. And I would also like to thank all of the organizers once again for their professionalism. Thank you. Thank you very much, my dear colleagues. Thank you for your presentations. I think that we can maybe take some of the questions. To start off with, we can go to John Messenger. John Messenger has been working on the issue of teleworking for a long time. He works for the International Employment Bureau, and I would like to give him the floor so that we can bounce a couple of questions off him. I'll give him 2 questions at a time to John. And there are actually questions looking at how teleworking has evolved, but what is of huge importance to us is really if you could talk about the significant effects that we're seeing on the workplace when it comes to teleworking. How has this changed the game? John, if you're ready, you have the floor.
First of all, because I know there have been some really difficult times during the webinar with people hearing. So I assume everyone can hear me. Yes? If everyone can hear me, then I'll go ahead. So in terms of how telework has evolved, I think it's important to consider the big picture. And what we sometimes don't realize is that telework actually has been around for quite a long time. It began in California, actually way back when, in the 1970s, in the mid-1970s. It was invented by a fellow by the name of Jack Niles, who used to, at one point in his career, work for NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Agency that sent astronauts to the moon. So he was very much a big thinking guy, looking for new ideas. And at the time in Southern California, they had both very advanced information technology, which they still have today, but they also had probably some of the world's most advanced traffic jams. So they had huge problems with traffic. And the idea of telework or telecommuting, as it was first created, was commuting by means of telecommunications. That is, instead of getting in your car and driving to work along with millions of other people and clogging up the roads, you could actually work at a distance by means of communication. So you could commute by means of telecommunication. So that's where it came from. And then since then, telework has evolved in three identifiable stages, which I talk about in my recent book, which is called Telework in the 21st Century, an Evolutionary Perspective. And the introduction, it came out, believe it or not, last November, and I had no idea that the pandemic was coming when I put it out. Nobody actually was interested in it for the first few months after it was out. Then all of a sudden this year in March, with the COVID hitting Europe especially, and the confinement and lockdown measures that followed, all of a sudden everybody seemed to be interested. So anyway, it's evolved over time in three generations, the first being the home office in the 70s and 1980s, which ironically is kind of where we're back to today. The idea that you were working mainly from home in lieu of going to the workplace. Then it turned into the mobile office, where you could actually start working with laptops in different locations, not just at home or in the office or at the employer's premises, office or factory or whatever, but you could actually work at places in between too. You could work on trains and planes and other kinds of vehicles. You could work in coffee shops and other places as well. And more recently, with the coming of the internet, has come what I call the virtual office. And the virtual office is working anytime, anywhere. As we talked about also in a report that I did with the European Foundation for Improvement of Living and Working Conditions a few years ago, which means you can literally, if you have an internet connection, you can work anywhere and at any time. And of course, this has massive implications in terms of the effects on the world of work. Because while it's fine to work anytime and anywhere, it's really a bad idea to be working at every time and everywhere. You get into excessive hours, you get serious problems of all kinds. So what do we see in terms of the effects of telework on the world of work? Well, let me try to summarize it in a nutshell. I mean, on the positive side, the advantages of telework, workers report a reduction, of course, in commuting time. That seems pretty obvious. Some of the colleagues from Algeria talked about that as well. They also have greater working time autonomy. That is, greater autonomy in the way they organize their given number of hours of work, so that they can organize it in a way that helps them to actually be able to handle both their paid work and also their unpaid responsibilities, whether family responsibilities and other household tasks, personal things, leisure, whatever. They can organize their working hours, their working time in the way that best suits them. We also see a better overall work-life balance for workers who telework, as well as higher levels of productivity. Certainly at least the same level, but in some cases, in fact, in many cases, managers report and employees themselves report that workers are actually higher performing than they were before teleworking. On the downside, you see disadvantages, longer working hours. The problem is not, as many managers seem to fear, that workers who are working remotely won't be working as hard or as long. The danger is workers who work remotely have a tendency to work longer hours, actually. So longer working hours, an overlap or a blurring between paid work and personal life, which can cause a lot of work-life conflict, a lot of conflict between paid work and personal life. That's an issue, and managing the boundary is very, very critical. We call it work-home interference in the social science literature, as well as the potential for work intensification, because you work more interrupted. And that's a good thing in the sense that you are focused on your task, and therefore you can concentrate, but you can also end up really working intensively. You can end up sitting down in front of your computer and working nonstop for hours, and that becomes too much. So there is both upsides and downsides with this. And one key thing I would emphasize is that this pandemic, which we've seen an explosion in telework, is not how telework was designed to be practiced. Telework is supposed to be voluntary, and it's supposed to be done generally on a part-time or occasional basis, not mandatory forced teleworking being done on a full-time basis permanently. So it shouldn't be mandatory, full-time, and permanent. It should be voluntary, part-time, or occasional, and generally temporary given the situation, although you might have a permanent arrangement for 1 or 2 days a week. So that's sort of what we see in terms of evolution, and that's what we see in terms of the basic effects of telework on the world of work. Thierry, did you have another question?
Oui, merci John pour cette première.
Thank you very much, John. Yes, there are other questions about what the future has in store. You spoke about the fact that we can have this mixed model, which means that some of the work you're doing is teleworking, and then we're trying to find a balance about going into work, even if it's just about seeing your teammates. But what do you think that the future has in store? How do you think that teleworking is going to evolve in the future? Do you think that there are spanners that are going to be thrown in the works, maybe technical constraints, legal constraints, or just the fact that we don't have a framework in place, that culturally speaking, we're not ready for this? What does the future have in store, John? You have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Thierry. I prefer to speak actually in English, even though, en fait, j'habite en France, ma maison est en France, et je travaille
France. I work in France. I work in French. I've been working here for 6 months.
Points exactly. I mean, it depends. In terms of the future, what do I foresee? It really depends on a number of different things. One is you've got to be able to have the capabilities. Even here in France, I've been challenged in terms of my internet connectivity. I was previously living in an apartment in Geneva, and the connectivity was much better because they have fiber optic cable there. And so everything is virtually instantaneous, and I never have any problem doing anything there. Whereas here, I've been challenged in a number of different things. Now things seem to be stabilized since I've started to use a cable to connect directly to my internet box. But this is a perfect example. So even in rural France, 40 kilometers from Geneva, we have problems with connectivity. And those countries that have internet connectivity problems, or more rural areas of countries that might have very good connectivity in major cities, will pose a barrier to telework. But I see the bigger barrier, and the bigger barrier throughout, as my research with Eurofound and also my book that just came out, both point in the same direction, and it's organizational resistance and managerial resistance. Because organizations and managers generally don't want to cede control over workers. And they're used to managing workers in a certain way. Often it's more monitoring than it is actually managing the worker. In order to be able to make telework effective, not only beneficial for the worker, but also beneficial for the organization, you need to manage by objectives. You need a results-based approach. You need to use very clear objectives, tasks, milestones, specific dates for deliverables, and regular, but not too heavy, check-in periods. So not every day, maybe every week, maybe every couple of weeks, but the key is to have a basic results-based framework in place, and that will hopefully, one, facilitate achieving the objectives, and two, help make managers more comfortable with allowing this. Now, there was no choice in the case of the pandemic. That's one of the reasons I think this is a breakthrough moment for telework, because organizations, if they wanted to continue functioning, they had to do something, and the best available option was working from home. So that's what they did. They were forced to do it. So it sort of broke through this long-standing barrier to telework. And I think it has changed mentalities. People have struggled through. We heard from some of our colleagues, for example, some of our colleagues in Belgium, in the Flemish part of Belgium, talk about how hard it was at the beginning, what a great adjustment it was for them. It was an enormous adjustment, and people weren't prepared. And this is not how you should do it. You should do it making sure people have the right equipment, both hardware and software, the right training, the right preparation. That's for both the employees who are telework and also the managers who are managing remote teams. It's much harder to manage remote teams than it is to manage a team in the office. So all of this is key in order to ensuring that this works properly. Now, I do think the future for telework looks much brighter than I would have predicted even during the time of publication of my book last year. It's simply because I think we've broken through a lot of barriers, many of them psychological barriers to the use of telework now, and people are more ready to embrace it. At the same time, having seen both the upsides and the downsides, they recognize that the best way to do telework is not, in fact, full-time, permanent basis, which is kind of how I'm doing it now, but then again, I'm an expert at it, so it's a lot easier for me. But rather to be able to spend part of the time in the office, reconnecting with colleagues and the organization, having time to chat at the coffee pot or the water cooler, having time for those social interactions, for in-person meetings and things like this. I mean, it is better to have some in-person interactions, not all remote interactions. But at the same time, if you go half-half, which seems to be, as I said, the sweet spot, the ideal, then half the time working remotely, then you have time for concentrated focus on tasks, being able to sit down and write reports, being able to sit down and write papers, write memos, write or do whatever you need to do, thinking work, analytical work, data analysis. I mean, that you can do best by yourself in a quiet place. And I can't think of a better place than your home, unless, of course, you have a lot of young children, in which case you certainly need to find a place that's really cut off from the rest of the house. You need your own little office. You can close the door and focus, because that's the strength of telework. It allows you to focus on specific tasks and really do them in an intensive and focused way. So half-half, I think that's what organizations are going to realize going forward when they learn the lessons of the pandemic. I think they're going to realize, hey, telework works a lot better than I thought. But at the same time, to be able to maintain the bonds within a team and within an organization, you need time together physically. So you need a balance between the two. And that's kind of what I think is going to happen in the future. Much greater use of telework than prior to the pandemic, but it's going to be mostly on a voluntary basis, mostly part-time or occasionally, and it's going to be something that really is done in combination with working in the office.
Thank you very much, John. I just want to clarify something. It's another question that was asked, actually. And can we talk about whose responsibility is it when it comes to teleworking? So when you're working at home, from an insurance point of view, how does that work? Sometimes you have, in rural areas, employees that meet together to work together. So the whole idea of the workplace is changing, and I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you very much, John Messenger. Maybe now we could give the floor. I know that the time that was allocated to this session is coming to an end. So if our chair, Mr. El Madani, is available, I would like to give him the floor so that he can wrap things up. You're giving me back the floor? Okay. I imagine that Mr. El Madani is not online. He's not available. I imagine that he's trying to connect. I maybe can go back to the questions about management. And it's actually a question that's come up time and time again. We can see that the different job-seeking agencies who spoke about their experiences with teleworking had started looking at this prior to the pandemic. how they could work with their managers, to have maybe a different managerial relationship based on trust. This proved to be very timely and very efficient, especially when during the pandemic and during lockdown, people were having to work from home. And the idea was to ensure that there was the same level of productivity. I don't know if our chair, if our president is online, Mr. El Madani.
Mr. El Madani is not participating and will not participate in the meeting today. So I give you the floor back. The floor is yours.
Okay, so in that case, I think that we can wrap up this session, this webinar. We are going to take into consideration all of the questions that were asked in the chat, and we will task ourselves with responding to this over the course of the next few days. So we'll get together. We will also make different documents available on the WAPES website. This will allow you not only to follow the different discussions that have occurred over the course of today, but also give you access to other information. I'd like to thank all of the speakers, all of the technical teams. I'm really sorry once again for the different technical difficulties that arose. It speaks volumes about the fact that we maybe still have a little work to do when it comes to our technological literature. On behalf of WAPES, on behalf of the President and the Vice President and the whole team, I would like to thank you, and I look forward to seeing you very soon on our website.
Every speaker and every participant. Have a very nice day, and we hope to see you all again soon in the virtual world, of course. Thank you very much.